days ago, Donald Trump appointed a new spokesperson for the Defense Department. His name is Sean Parnell. If that name sounds at all familiar, it's because the last thing he did in politics was fail in his effort to win a U.S. Senate seat from Pennsylvania. Mr. Parnell dropped out of the Republican primary after a judge took away custody of his children and ruled that Mr. Parnell had been violent and abusive toward the children and his wife. His wife had accused him, among other things, of throwing chairs at her, of dropping her off on an interstate on the side of the road when she was 6 months pregnant and telling her to get an abortion. She accused him of choking and strangling her. He denies the allegations, but that all came out during the campaign. And after the judge's ruling in that case, Mr. Parnell dropped out of the Republican primary, and he thus failed to win that U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. That is the last thing that Sean Parnell did in public life. That's the last thing he did in politics. Now Donald Trump has named him spokesman for the Pentagon. Person who won that Republican primary for that Senate seat in Pennsylvania and then lost the Senate race in the general election, that was Mimet Oz, Dr. Oz. Trump has now named him to run Medicare and Medicaid. So that was the Pennsylvania Senate seat. In the Georgia Senate races, there were 4 different Republicans who lost while trying to get Senate seats from Georgia in 2020 and 2022. Who have all now been named to things in the Trump administration. Kelly Laffler lost a Georgia Senate race in 2020. Trump named her to head the Small Business Administration. David Purdue lost a Georgia Senate race in 2020. Trump named him to be ambassador to China. Doug Collins lost in the primary for Georgia Senate in 2020. Trump named him to run the VA. Herschel Walker lost a Georgia Senate race in 2022. Trump named him to be ambassador to the Bahamas. Carrie Lake lost her run for Arizona governor in 2022, and then she lost her run for Arizona senator in 2024. Trump just named her to run the Voice of America. Lori Chavez Dreamer lost her House seat in 2024 in Oregon. Trump named her to run the U.S. Labor Department. Brandon Williams lost his House seat in 2024 in New York. Trump named him to run the National Nuclear Security Administration, God help us all. Lee Zeldin lost his race for New York governor. Trump named him to run the EPA. Caroline Leavitt lost her campaign for a congressional seat in New Hampshire. Trump named her White House press secretary. The only thing wrestling executive Linda McMahon ever did in politics was lose 2 consecutive U.S. Senate races in Connecticut. Trump named her Secretary of Education. The last thing Tulsi Gabbard ever did in politics was disastrously lose a presidential run in 2020. Trump has named her Director of National Intelligence, which is like a horse walks into a bar joke without a horse or a bar. The only thing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ever did in politics was run and then quit a presidential campaign this year. Now he's Trump's nominee to lead Health and Human Services. Who is Harmeet Dillon? Harmeet Dillon lost a race for Republican Party chair this year. Then Trump named her to lead the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. Sam Brown lost a Nevada Senate race this year. Trump has put him at the VA. Dave Weldon lost a race for state legislator in Florida. Trump has now named him to lead the CDC. Dan Bishop lost the Attorney General's race in North Carolina this past year. Trump has made him the #2 official at OMB. Bo Hines just lost a congressional race in North Carolina, so Trump put him on his new crypto board. Joe Kent has lost 2 consecutive races for Congress in Washington state. Trump just named him head of the National Counterterrorism Center. You noticing a theme here? I mean, I could go on, but are you noticing a theme? I mean, people keep saying no one elected Elon Musk, and that is definitely true. But you know, at least in his case, he didn't try. He didn't run for something and have the people resoundingly say, no, we don't want you, we prefer someone else and not you, and so you will lose this race. But in this second term, they really are stuffing the whole administration with people who have, not just once upon a time, lost an election here or there. All politicians at some point usually lose something. No. This is like the last thing you did was lose a thing. They almost seem to be going out of their way to find people for whom the last thing they did in politics, the last thing they did in public life, was ask the public to approve of them, and the public said, no, we do not want you. It's almost as if they're going out of their way to say, oh, you the people are saying no? We say that doesn't matter, because you may not want us. You may not want this. You may not want us. But this is who and what you're getting, and you're stuck with it. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote her famous, brilliant book about Abraham Lincoln building his, brave, capable government out of a team of rivals. With Trump, it's like a big team of losers, people who the American people explicitly do not want. People who just had the opportunity to be voted into office by the American people, and the American people said definitively, no, don't want you. And so Trump is saying, well, that's who you're getting, and you'll like it. How many of these folks can I find? So there's a lot going on, like there is every day now. Tonight, more tragic news. Tonight, yet another fatal plane crash. We are 3 weeks into this new administration, and as of today, we've had, just in that 3-week period, we've had the deadliest fatal plane crash in more than 20 years. The mid-air collision over the Potomac River in Washington that killed 67 people. That was followed a couple days later by the crash that killed 7 people and injured 24 more people on the ground in Philadelphia. That was followed by a plane catching fire on the runway in Houston, forcing all the passengers to evacuate downstairs in slides. That was followed by the crash between a plane and a tug at the airport at Chicago O'Hare, critically injuring an airport worker. That was followed by this Japan airplane slicing into the wing of a Delta plane at SeaTac. That was followed by another deadly crash at the end of last week, 10 people dead in a Bering air crash in Alaska, just outside of Nome, Alaska. And now, today, another fatal crash.
No way, guys.
As a small jet slid off the runway at the airport in Scottsdale, Arizona, and smashed into another jet. 1 person is dead, 3 are injured. We'll be watching for more news on that as it develops this evening. Again, that crash is in Scottsdale. And this is the 4th fatal aviation incident in the United States in 3 weeks. 1 mid-air collision, 2 single airplane crashes, and now 2 planes smashing into one another just off an airport runway. When's the last time we had 4 fatal aviation incidents in 3 weeks? The administration's explanation thus far has been to blame diversity somehow, and also to say, well, we'll take care of it. We'll have the cost cutters who work for the president's top campaign donor get to work in getting into the aviation system. None of the kids who work for Elon Musk have any aviation experience or safety experience or any experience doing anything like this, except there is that one kid working for Musk who appears to have been pretty deeply involved in working in and around criminal hacking and extortion groups. So at least there's that. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on every day. But so as to not get too overwhelmed with the pace of things, with I think what we're all experiencing as this torrent of bad news. I do think it's possible to recognize that not everything sort of fits in the same bucket. Not all of these things are the same, right? So in one category, I would put, bad outcomes, right? Plane crashes, bird flu jumping species and sparking new outbreaks. American farmers having been told by the government that if they install new fencing and dig a new well and upgrade their electrical, the government will subsidize that, will reimburse them for doing that. Now that those American farmers have spent that money, the Trump administration has decided they're not, in fact, paying them for it. So now those farmers are potentially going to go bankrupt, right? The shuttering of programs that prevent the spread of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, programs that stop famines, programs that test cancer drugs and all the rest. All of these things are bad outcomes. I would even even say like Charles Kushner, that's a bad outcome, right? Having a convicted felon as the ambassador to one of our most important allies, that itself is bad. Rod Blagojevich, that's bad. Pardoning politicians for profound and proven corruption, that's just a bad outcome on its face. So that's one category. So there's a second category, which is self-dealing and abuse of office. We're going to talk this hour about some of the amazing benefits that Donald Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, is getting for himself and his companies now that Trump has let him take over running the government. There's things like, the inherently worthless Trump meme coin, on which he's made tens of millions of dollars already, thanks to the suckers who are willing to pay for it, right? There's all that. Like there's the bad outcomes. There's the self-dealing and corruption. I'd say those are the first two categories. But the thing that we're going to focus on tonight, and that I think, in a good sense, I think a lot of the country is starting to focus on right now, is a different category. It's not just a bad outcome. It's not just self-dealing and corruption. It's a third category that poses the risk of what I would call autocratic breakthrough. That's like the political science term for it. It's not just something turning out bad. It's not just you doing things in a way that is corrupt or for your own self rather than for the people you're supposed to be serving. It is breaking systems so that you can't be stopped. It's when they do things with their power that aren't just bad, that aren't just corrupt or self-dealing. They're designed to change the government and the country and the system so they can never be removed from power. So opposition to them becomes impossible or illegal or dangerous. So it doesn't matter what we want or what we don't want. It doesn't matter what we intend to vote for or vote against. They're staying anyway, and they'll do what they want regardless of how the rest of the country feels about it. That's autocratic breakthrough. And in that category, there's stuff to watch. The attacks on the media are not important because you have to like the media. They're important because without the media, the public's not going to know things the government doesn't want them to know. The attacks on the inspectors general and the oversight agencies, they're not necessarily important because you have to love the inspectors general and the oversight agencies. But again, it's a categorical change. In taking out the inspectors general and the oversight agencies, these guys are protecting themselves from being investigated or being stopped by those watchdogs, but they're also preventing the public from knowing about whatever malfeasance may be going on. And in that category, the autocratic breakthrough category, the changing the system so we can't be removed from office, so that we can act without regard for what the American people want or say or do. In that category, the big kahuna is the attack on the courts. You may have seen the headline tonight. We had a federal judge block the big cuts they just imposed on scientific and medical research. The amount of scientific and medical research funding and the way that funding is structured is set up by law. And to cut it unilaterally is to violate that law. So those scientific and medical research cuts have been blocked tonight by a federal judge. We've also had a federal judge block the resign or else threats against millions of federal workers that are trying to induce them into quitting their jobs. That has been blocked by a federal judge. We've had a federal judge block the Elon Musk improper access to the Treasury's payment system. That has been blocked by a federal judge. We've had a federal judge block their efforts to send 3 Venezuelan men to Guantanamo. We had a federal judge block the release of the names of FBI agents who worked on January 6th cases. We've had 3 different judges block the effort to overturn birthright citizenship, the American principle enshrined in the Constitution that says if you're born here, you're American. We have had 2 federal judges now block the government funding halt. We have had a federal judge block the shutdown of USAID and the order that everybody at USAID has to be fired or put on leave. We've had judges stop thing after thing after thing that they've been trying to do. And all of those losses in court, I mean, we're only 3 weeks into the administration. How have they lost in court this many times already? Well, it's because they're doing a lot of things all at once that seem, at least at first glance, to be quite illegal. And so judges are stopping them from doing these things as fast as lawsuits can be filed. But the important thing here is the response to these court orders, because in, for example, the funding halt case, where the judges are saying you cannot halt these funds have to go ahead. In the USAID case, where the judge says you cannot shut USAID and put the whole staff on leave, you have to reverse that. In those cases already, we have had the new administration lose in court, and we have also had the new administration appear to defy those court orders. In both cases, the plaintiffs have gone back to court in those cases saying, Your Honor, your ruling is not being obeyed. They're still doing what you ordered them not to do. And that has bad consequences, true, right? Directly. There's a reason these cases were brought in the first place, which is you can't do this illegal thing, and also if you do this thing, it causes harm. So the fact that they're defying the court orders directly has bad consequences. USAID still being shut has bad consequences. Those funding halts still have bad consequences. But categorically, the most important thing here is their willingness to defy the courts, because that is the ultimate autocratic breakthrough. A declaration that the rule of law does not apply to them, that it cannot constrain anything they want to do. That is worse than any one outcome, right? That is a forever decision. That means nothing anyone else wants and no court ever rules will ever again have any impact on what our government wants to do to us. That is a category of its own. That is the key to autocratic breakthrough. And that is where we find ourselves on the precipice, looking over the edge tonight. Elizabeth Warren joins us next. Stay with us.